Well, it's raining as you can hear, and although this morning was absolutely beautiful, there was a storm coming in from the Atlantic. I could see that. I could not actually see the storm, but the changing sky. I posted some lovely photographs up on Facebook on the Magical Garden site for those of you who follow that. And anyway, the storm is here, so you can hear the rain on the tunnel, and it's quite rhythmic, really. You could quite easily sit in here just and listen to the rain falling. I'm just going to quickly go through the tunnel so you can see what's happening. The honesty here is just beginning to flower, and you can see how massively that's grown just over the past few days, really. And there's no need to say anything about the rhubarb because that's taking over. That's got world domination in its sights. Incredible chamomile, and the way it's seeded down here, I've shown you that. Fennel, lots and lots of blossom on the nectarine tree. I'm so glad I pruned that, and I'll have to be mindful and cruel enough as well to remove some of the fruits. I hate taking any of the fruits off a tree when it's just beginning to give of its best, but experience has taught me that that's something I need to do. All the seeds that I scattered down here, and I haven't got a clue what they are, fruit, vegetables, whatever. As you can see, look, they've just gone crazy. Peas are coming up, seeds in here, all the little root cuttings that I potted up, like the mint, looks doing really well. So it's all thriving, and this is the first year that the little peach tree that I saved from the bin at Lidl's is blossoming. Look at that. Absolutely gorgeous. Look, another little blossom up there, and a few little blossoms over there. You can just see them. So I'm just delighted with that, really delighted. I brought I was going to say geraniums, I mean pelargoniums. I brought them in here, and I've shaken out all the old soil and put some fresh compost and compost around them. So now the other thing I wanted to show you, especially those of you who bought fuchsia cuttings from the website. The last batch of fuchsia cuttings I sent out, which was about 2 weeks ago, because of course I'm not taking cuttings now. The cuttings are off limits until all the foliage, dies down, the fall, whatever. But anyway, I'm going to show you what I did at the same time as I posted off the last cuttings. I potted up some cuttings myself. So here we go. This is the first one. Now look, can you see all the little bits of green? All the little leaves coming out? And do you remember from one of the videos I showed you some of the cuttings I just laid on the top of the soil? There we go. Well, look at that. Can you see? And that was like a little experiment. I wanted to see if just throwing them onto the soil would produce fuchsia, and indeed it has. So we'll keep an eye on those as the season progresses. And I sowed some of my nasturtiums because I had masses of those. And look at this. Okay, now the rain has stopped. What we're going to do, and this is especially for Lynn, because I promised Lynn that I would do a little video down in the fairy wood, and tell the story of the old fairy thorn down there. So we're about to go down into the fairy wood. Before I go, I also want to mention Jen, Patrick and Jen. Jen, I know you're watching. I hope you're feeling better soon. And I also want to mention Janet Hall Frith. Thank you very much, Janet, for your donation. There are a few real generous patrons of Belton Cottage, and Janet, you're one of them. Lynn, you're another as well. So thank you so much. For all the people who watch these videos, thank you. Thank you for watching. And we'll go off down into the fairy wood. Now you'll be able to see what the fairy wood is in relation to the cottage. Someone did ask me if I would do a map. I haven't got the time to do a map. I will do a map at some point. It's going on the long finger, as they say here in Ireland. There's the cottage. There's the tunnel. Okay. And now we're going down into the fairy wood. On the right here is the badger set. It has 4 entrances, I think. And as you can see, I've been taking some of the ivy off the ash tree. The ivy, can you see it, look? Very, very thick. And I've also removed chunks of the ivy from these trees, because if you don't, the ivy takes over the tree and can be responsible for bringing it down in a storm. Okay, so on the left here is the old rowan tree, and 12 years ago when I bought Beltona, well, on a mortgage, I still don't own it. But I'm a caretaker, and look, we don't own anything at the end of the day, do we? We come into this world naked, we leave naked, unless someone cares to throw a cheque for all we own into the coffin, in which case we leave with all our worldly goods. But anyway, this is the rowan tree that fell over, and I left it because rowan trees are very magical. They're like the fairy thorn. You don't interfere too much with them. So I didn't. And look what happened. It just grew from the old stump that had fallen over. And now we have many magical rowan trees. Okay, so we're going to go down these little steps that I made. Now hopefully the rain will keep off for a while. Okay, I'm going to just turn around so you can see how far I've actually come down here. Okay, there's about, must be about an 8 to 10 foot drop coming down there. And one of the reasons why the fairy wood is so luxuriously green all the year round, because it is in a dell. It's a proper little woodland dell. See all the spurge and the primroses. We're walking along this little path. There's the other side of the rowan tree. And this is where the path diverges, like the Robert Frost poem. That goes down past the little spring well. And we're going to continue on. And you can see where there was a lot of cutting of branches last year, and they were all stacked. I try to do that wherever possible, is to stack the wood and to allow it to rot back down into the earth, because it feeds the earth and it also provides habitat for small mammals and birds and bees and insects whilst that's happening. So here we are. Now this is the old fairy thorn. Okay, it is quite ancient. No real idea how old this is. It's got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It has somewhere between 10 and 12 stems on it. So that's where it's regenerated. So the original tree, is still there, but it has regenerated many times over. Now when you look around here, there's virtually no evidence of grazing animals in the past. And in fact, when I first bought the old cottage and land, this particular area was so thick in brambles there was no way an animal, even a strong animal like a cow, could have got entrance to this area. So that sort of interested me for a start, because where you have land where it has become quite definably impenetrable, then there's always a question mark. Why has that happened? Why has the land been left? So clearing the brambles, and there's still a little bit of evidence of some of the brambles here, but I suppose when I talk about clearing the brambles, I'm talking about 40 and 50 feet long brambles. Massive, massive. And I cleared, and I found this enchanting little tree, and I really had no idea of the age of it. I'm just going to step back here. I had no idea of the age of it. And I set about learning as much as I could about fairy thorns. There's a massive, absolutely massive amount of material relating to these ancient trees. And if you were to go onto any of the search engines and look for fairy thorns and the hawthorn tree, and especially in Ireland, there's an amazing amount of superstition around them. So the story of this fairy thorn it's gathered from the evidence that I've collected. And the first thing is, and perhaps the saddest thing as well about it, is the evidence down here of a burial. Now, there's a massive stone here. And just go close, and I'll just take back some of the moss. Okay, and when you go right in there, in fact there's soil and everything now on top of it, but you can see the stone. Can you see the stone? Let's see if I can get I don't want to uncover too much, alright? But that's where the stone is there, and it's a massive stone. So I'm just going to put that back. The evidence of a stone, the tree, the particular tree, the isolation, leads me to believe that there was a burial here. Now, what happened, anyone who knows the history of Catholicism in Ireland will be familiar with this. Anyone who has watched the film The Field, written by John B. Keane, will also be familiar with this story. And anyone who, like myself, who was involved in the burial of a baby, although the baby was baptized, will be familiar with this. If a baby was born and died before the priest could baptize it, the baby's soul would be condemned to limbo. And limbo in the Catholic tradition is a place where it was literally limbo. It was neither heaven nor hell. And the remains of the baby could not be buried in the church graveyard. Was not allowed to be buried in the church graveyard because it was an unbaptized soul. Yes, I know it sounds barbaric and it's completely repulsive to me and always has been repulsive to me. And I don't agree with it, or in fact any of the nonsense concerning it in any way, shape or form. So I'll put that aside, okay? But the baby wasn't allowed to be buried in the church graveyard. So, of course, before the advent of Christianity, very unchristian that was, but before the advent of Christianity, the Celts believed that there was a sacredness in everything. There was a deep connection between the people and the land, very deep. And the fairy lore was common. Everyone believed in the Sidhe. So, if the church, if God would not accept the body of the unbaptized dead infant, then the fairies would. And so it was not uncommon to have the remains of the little human being placed beside the fairy tree and a stone placed on top. And so for all of eternity the fairies would mind the child. William Butler Yeats makes a lot of references to these stories in his poetry. And if you read the beautiful poem, Come Away, O Human Child, come away, O human child, to the waters and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand. With a fairy hand in hand. It sounds lovely, doesn't it? Sounds lovely. To me, it actually sounds even more delightful. In the terrible event of losing a child, that it would become, it would be minded by the fairies. You know, that's a beautiful image, actually. So the other poor human being whose body was not allowed to be buried in the church graveyard, and the one that John B. Keane refers to in his play The Field, is of course the suicide victim. Suicide has always been part of the unspoken here in Ireland. but it has always been part of the people. It's something within the Celtic psyche, I think, which is perhaps as much a connection to the other world as this world. In fact, the Celts didn't even recognise barriers between either. So if your wife or your husband or your mother or your father or your daughter or your son or your child was to take their own life, their body was not allowed to be interred. Now, in many cases, they were buried on the outside of the wall of the graveyard. I think that's what happened in The Field. A wonderful film, by the way. I would suggest you watch that. It's a beautiful film starring Richard Harris. But in some instances, of course, the people would say, well, damn them. Well, damn the church. My son, my daughter, my child, my husband, my wife, my lover, whoever, will be buried here beside the fairy tree, beside the fairy thorn. So what lies beneath that stone is in all possibility a little life. What once was a little life, and I like to think continues as a magical, wonderful experience of the universal consciousness, for that's what I believe in. I believe in the universal consciousness, that nothing is ever lost. And so that's the story of the fairy thorn. I'm just going to walk up here. See, I planted little trees in here. And look at the lovely honeysuckle. Now here in Ireland, of course, we call that woodbine. And this is the woodbine, which just see all the little primroses there. Without doubt, this is a very special little place. And visitors to Belton Cottage who've come here and stood by the tree and touched the tree have felt that rush of energy, that connection. It is a portal to the fairy world. And not even supposed to use the name of fairy, but I do because I feel in many ways I'm sort of communicating with them by acknowledging them. I acknowledge them. I have no fear. There's nothing to fear. My grandmother always said, Colette, have no fear of the dead. 'Tis only the living can do you harm. And that statement, which has resonated with me down through the years, remains very true to this day. What I'm going to do now is just walk slowly up through the rest of the fairy wood. It's very wet, so I'm walking with very tentative, careful steps. Fairy thorn is gone now. And again we rise up, because this is very much in the dell. It's my little angel guarding the fairy wood. So we're rising up now. and out through this little portal, and I'll turn back round. You can see. And round here